everyone, and welcome. Today, we're digging into a question that sounds super simple on the surface, but actually has some pretty deep and frankly surprising answers. When you own something, what do you actually own? We're going to break down the core ideas of real and personal property to figure it all out. So let's just imagine for a second. You did it. You bought your dream house. You own the building, you own the yard, the driveway, the whole shebang. But what about the air, way up over your head? Do you own that? Do you own the space where the birds are flying? Or what about the ground deep, deep beneath your feet? It's a really fascinating question, and believe me, the answer is not as simple as you'd think.
To get to the bottom of this, we have to start from the ground up, and, as we're about to see, from the ground down, too. The entire legal concept of property is built on a very specific definition of just one thing: land.
Okay, and this is where it gets kind of wild. The scale of this idea is what's so amazing. Legally, land isn't just the dirt you can see. It's this column of ownership that, in theory, stretches from the literal center of the planet all the way up into the heavens. It's a mind-boggling concept for sure, but it does come with some very real practical limits. And here is the big catch when it comes to owning the sky. While, yeah, you do own the airspace above your house, the courts have basically said there's a public highway up there. You know, as long as airplanes and now drones aren't unreasonably messing with your enjoyment of your property, they have a right to pass through. So, no, you can't start sending invoices to the airlines for flying over your backyard. So what about down below? Well, you own the soil, the rock, and you do have the right to drill straight down for valuable stuff like oil and gas. But here's the key. Because oil and gas are considered fugitive, I love that term, it means they can move around underground. You can't drill at an angle and sneak under your neighbor's property to get theirs. Your rights stop right at your property line. All right, so now that we've got the ground covered, literally, let's build on that foundation to understand the first major category of ownership, and that's real property. Real property includes the land itself, plus anything that is permanently attached or affixed to it. Now, this is the stuff you'd expect, right? The house, the trees, the fences, but it also includes things inside the house, like those built-in kitchen cabinets or the dishwasher that's all plumbed in. If it's attached and meant to stay, it's generally considered part of the real property. Now, this concept is a little more abstract, but stick with me, it's really important. Real property can also include rights that go along with the land. The classic example is something called an easement. Just imagine your driveway has to cross a tiny corner of your neighbor's yard to get to the street. That legal right you have to cross their land is an appurtenant right, and it's legally attached to your property. It gets bought and sold right along with the house itself. So if you're going to boil it all down to one single word, one core idea for real property, it's this: immovable. It's the land and all the things that are stuck to it, things that you can't just pick up and walk away with. Okay, so if real property is all the immovable stuff, what do we call everything else? Well, that brings us right to our second big category, personal property. You know, I absolutely love this metaphor because it makes the difference crystal clear. Just think of real property as the permanent stage. It's not going anywhere. Personal property? That's all the actors, the props, the furniture, all the stuff that can be moved on, off, and around that stage. The old-school legal term for personal property is chattel, and wow, it covers a huge range of things. It's your car, your couch, your cash, but it also includes things you can't really touch, like documents that represent a debt, and even things you might not expect, like leases and mortgages. The simple rule of thumb: if you can move it, it's almost certainly personal property. Seems pretty straightforward, right? Immovable is real, movable is personal. Easy enough. But of course, this is where the law gets really fun, because sometimes that clear, clean line, well, it starts to get pretty blurry. This brings us to the fixture. It's like the bridge that connects these two worlds. A fixture starts its life as personal property. Think of a bookshelf you bought from a store. But the moment you bolt it to the wall, it can legally transform and become part of the real property. But, and this is a really big but, there's a critical exception called a trade fixture. So that homeowner's built-in bookshelf becomes part of the house and it stays when they sell. But what about a special heavy-duty oven installed by a baker who's just renting a storefront? That oven is essential for their business. The law gets this, and it says they can take it with them when their lease is up, as long as they don't damage the building on the way out. It stays their personal property. So how do you tell the difference? Well, it often comes down to these two big questions. First, has the item become such an integral part of the place that you can't imagine it without it? And second, what was the intent? Was it put there by a tenant specifically for their business? The answers to those questions usually determine if an item stays or if it goes. And check out this other fantastic exception, emblements. Think about a farmer who rents a field to grow a crop of corn. Now, even though those corn stalks are physically attached to the land, which you'd think would make them real property, the law recognizes that the crops are there because of the tenant's hard work. So they're treated as the tenant's personal property. They get to harvest it. Okay, so we've talked a lot about what you own, but there's another crucial dimension we need to explore here, and that is, for how long do you own it? Because you see, ownership isn't always permanent. Now, when you hear a lawyer talk about your estate in a property, they're not necessarily talking about some giant mansion with a 10-car garage. In this context, an estate is simply the legal term that describes the nature and, more importantly, the duration of your ownership rights. So let's just quickly break down the main types. A perpetual estate is what we all think of as just normal ownership. It lasts forever and you can pass it on to your heirs. A life estate is more specific. It only lasts for as long as a particular person is alive. An estate for years, that's just a fancy legal way of saying a lease for a fixed amount of time, like your one-year apartment lease. And finally, an estate at will is your classic month-to-month rental with no fixed end date. Okay, wow, we have covered a ton of ground, from the center of the earth all the way up to the sky. So let's boil all of this down to the most important points you need to remember. Here it is, in a nutshell. Real property is the stage, it's immovable. Personal property is all the props on the stage, it's movable. Fixtures are that blurry line where the two can meet and even transform. And finally, estates are all about timing. They define the duration of your rights. You know, these rules might seem a little abstract, but I promise you, they're everywhere, governing everything from the lease on your apartment to the sale of a massive skyscraper. So I'll leave you with this to think about. Just look around you, right now. What fixture is in your home or your office that you've just never really thought about before? That ceiling fan? A special light? Now you know it has a hidden legal life all its own. Thanks for joining me.